So hi there, and welcome to this commentary track for the 1982 movie The Thing with me, Karl Smallwood from Fact Fiend. And first of all, thank you to everybody who supports the Untitled side channel Patreon and voted for this particular movie. It's one of my favourites of all time. We're just going to get right into it, and I'm pressing play on my copy of the movie right now. Bang! And I'll describe what I see on screen so you folks at home can sync it up, and it's just a universal picture in text. And fun fact about that, we'll start straight away with the facts, folks, is they were going to use the Universal logo, which has a cameo from Planet Earth, but they decided that might confuse people, considering the start of this movie. And a name you're going to see right there, Ennio Morricone, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, did the score for this movie, and you can hear that just coming in right now. And Mr. Morricone was horribly made fun of for his work on this soundtrack, and he would say many years later he tried to emulate the lo-fi work of John Carpenter, those classic synths that he makes use of on other movies. And many critics at the time just actively mocked his score. And fast forward about 20, 30 years, and he reused some of the score for The Thing that he didn't end up putting into his movie for a little movie called The Hateful Eight, which he got an Oscar for. So let that be a lesson to you there, folks. Critics are full of shit. And there it is, Mr. John Carpenter himself. It's apparently his favourite movie. And just to clarify, I have a big page full of facts in front of me now. You can hear me flicking through a book there. The actual facts on a computer screen in front of me, but I thought flicking through paper would sound more interesting. And it's like, so here's the intro that the Universal logo, that made them stop using the Universal logo, I should say. And I don't like this. I think the movie is much stronger without this intro, with the alien ship crashing onto the planet. I'd much prefer just this intro we're about to see here, which is, what's the thing? If it wasn't for that UFO, this intro would be perfect. And for anyone curious about how that effect was achieved, it is simply a fish tank filled with smoke, onto which they put a plastic bin liner, or garbage sack for you Americans, and they melted it away and just had the words of The Thing hidden behind it. Really low cost effect there, but it's really effective. And just goes to show, like, with a bit of imagination, you can get something that looks really good for very, very little money. Which is just the ethos of this film, because so much of the effects was accomplished for very little money on a shoestring budget. And something I think is quite weird to say about this film is that for me, The Thing is a comfort movie. And I know that's strange, isn't it? This is a movie about people being violently assimilated by a parasitic alien organism from beyond the stars. But when I think of The Thing, I think of cozy nights in, because I rewatch The Thing every year. And I try to rewatch it when it rains or snows. You know, it's like really dark outside and there's a lot of sleet or snow, and it's get all cozy under a blanket, crack open a beer or a whiskey and just sit and watch The Thing. Now, I know that's not the case for everybody, but for me, it is a comfort movie. It's just, whenever I think about watching The Thing, I think when I was very young, and I probably wasn't old enough to watch it, but snuggled onto my bed, my blankets at home, watching it on late night TV in black and white, because I had a black and white TV. And I will say The Thing in black and white is awesome. Just if anyone out there wants an experience, and there it is. Here's a dog. It's a doggo. It's a good dog. The name of this dog, Jed. It's a dog actor known as Jed. It's a half wolf, half Malamute. I'm not sure how you pronounce that particular breed of dog name, but this is a working acting dog. You can see he's having a great time. The dog's smiling. He's having a great time. He's known as Jed. He's apparently the most professional actor on the set. And here he is getting like 360 no scope by some Norwegians. And they are firing blanks there, and the dog didn't care. I said the dog was a very good actor. You can just see him there having just a whale of a time. And much of this film was filmed on location in British Columbia. And to get some pickup shots, they filmed the rest on a soundstage, which, to maintain realism, was cooled to below freezing, so that things like people's breath and stuff would still appear on screen without any sort of artificial shenanigans occurring there. Oh man. National Science Institute, Station 4. Where's Station 1, 2 and 3? Where were they for the rest of this film? And just, that synth. I love that synth. It's so good. And just establishing shot here, This is what the 80s look like, folks. Shit. And just a great tone setter here. Middle of the Arctic, and he's putting ice in his drink. Ice. Or Antarctic, I should say. Someone's going to pull me up on that one here. And the Chess Wizard, this is not a real thing, I checked. This is not a real computing program. This was an Apple II with a piece of custom software ran through it, and the Chess Wizard thing is just a sticker. Which you can see in Blu-ray copies, you can see there's like some crinkles there from a sticker that's just been put on. And the voice you hear right now is the only female voice in the entire film, and it was John Carpenter's wife at the time, doing an uncredited cameo. And there's apparently something here in like the chess move, which is representative of the entire film. It's one of those like film student-y things here where MacReady realizes he can't win, so he just blows up the machine. And if anyone remembers the end of the film, MacReady realizes he can't win and just blows up the entire base. But we'll get to the ending in a moment. But here we go. Here's Jed doing his best. Just go for a shot. And the thing is, it must be very difficult to make it like a dog is running for its life, because that dog is clearly having a great time. Look, that's the, you can see that the dog is panting and smiling. It's so adorable. And if it had been later in the film, maybe you'd have looked past that. But when it's the opening shot, it's just this dog having a great time. Just something about especially learning after the fact as well, the dog was an actor and it was like one of the most beloved members of the set. And the handler for it was like, yeah, this is a professional working dog. He knows what he's doing. That's Kurt Russell. What a man. Look at that beard. So that beard is real. That is Kurt Russell's real, actual beard. Reportedly, it took him 1 year of growth. So for all you guys coming out of the pandemic with like a wispy little beard, that's what Kurt Russell can grow in a year. Just straight away, like we have known hero of this earth. Just Keith David right there. And this is his first role. An illustrious career that continues to this day. You may know him as Reverse Giraffe from Rick and Morty. Hey, it's me, Reverse Giraffe. That line always cracks me up. Or Spawn, if you're so inclined. And I will say, like, these Norwegians are very bad at stopping this dog. Although I do respect the idea of just hand grenading the dog. Because it's not a dog, spoilers, it is a thing. And there is a very famous moment coming up here, which is one of those things where if you are bilingual, and in this case you speak Norwegian and English, the entire plot of the film is ruined from second one. Or it would be if there wasn't a giant fuck-off UFO in the opening seconds of the film. Like I said, I think this film works way better without the opening scene. I'm not sure why they put it in. I feel it was studio interference. There's Jed, just hauling some ass, hauling the most amount of dog ass you've ever seen. And these guys here, I have... Oh, what an idiot. What a loser. Why? So that's a real helicopter that was actually blown up there. And the wreckage of it was still there 30 years later. And I have the quote here from this Norwegian guy. He's saying, that's not a dog. It's some sort of thing. It's imitating a dog. It isn't real. Get away, you idiots. So that's what that Norwegian guy there is saying. And if anyone there spoke Norwegian, the entire plot of the film could have been avoided. And I love stuff like that, where just one mistake is the cause of all of this. If any of these guys were speaking Norwegian, or even just taking a second to wonder, why are these guys trying to frag a dog with hand grenades from a helicopter besides it looking rad? And I don't know that particular brand of scotch, but it is Kurt Russell's character's choice of scotch throughout the movie. And many critics of the time thought it was very bad and poor product placement. And it turns out it's just one of the scotches that Kurt Russell likes to drink. And it's like, your character's going to be drinking this in a lot of scenes. Like, well, might as well drink my favourite. And yet this was actual wreckage from an actual helicopter. And I believe the guy who runs the Thing fan website from which I got some of this information, Outpost 31, travelled up to British Columbia. And this wreckage was still there 30 years later. And they just left it behind. And he took the rotor blade. And fans of the film periodically make pilgrimages up there. It's apparently in a very, very remote part of the country. It's very difficult to get to. It takes several hours of travel from once you get to the actual location. To get there, you have to go through Alaska or something like that, and it was chosen specifically because it's so remote and just has the highest density of snowfall in North America. So they could reliably expect it to be snowing all the time. And yeah, just a guy came in and just took the rotor blade, which is apparently something you're able to do. You're able to just take a rotor blade from a helicopter and just drive home with it. Yeah, he has that, and according to him, it's one of his prized possessions. I've yet to learn if he has it signed, but if I was him, I would definitely get that signed. And I love that everyone's just wearing sunglasses. Because here's the thing that people maybe don't know about the Antarctic and the Arctic, that sunglasses are pretty much required. You saw Kurt Russell's character wearing them earlier. They are basically essential because the sun shines off of the snow and it's blinding. It's to the point where there's something known as snow blindness. They should be able to reach somebody. And they're just Wilford Brimley. Just being Wilford Brimley. Living his best life. And Wilford Brimley apparently is like a cowboy in real life, according to some of my reads. Oh, fuck. That guy got wrecked. Yeah, in real life. So for a lot of like the horror scenes that required them to like cut open bodies and things like that, Wilford Brimley didn't care. He's like, and a quote from him, I have it in front of me now. Let's scroll down. Because I have like several pages of notes here. There we go. He called it laundry. A few. And just one thing I should talk about is always like the actors in this film spent about as much time arguing about whether or not they're a thing and the nature of the thing and how it works, just as much as fans of the movie have. And according to John Carpenter, every actor was instructed to play every scene completely straight, whether or not they were a thing. And in fact, a lot of scenes in the script did not specify whether or not someone was a thing at any given point, so that would be maintained, because actors would continually argue about, well, if I was a thing, would I know? And that was something they would apparently argue about a lot, and their theory was that you would know, but if you were a thing, the thing would know that and would act as if it was surprised. But then some actors thought, well, if you were a thing, you wouldn't know. Or if you were a thing, that you'd be convinced of your own thingness. And it's just, I like the idea that the actors also argued about it. Oh yeah, cowboy hat. Norwegian. It's like, if any of you spoke Norwegian, this wouldn't be happening. And something you need to keep your eye out for this scene. The helicopter wobbles just a little bit when it takes off. And there is like a long-standing rumour that's Kurt Russell taking the controls. So they did have a helicopter pilot, oh, there's Jed. And just the synth coming in. Yeah, and the rumour is that's Kurt Russell taking the controls, because the helicopter pilot they got for the film was just insane. So you see it wobble a little bit. Oh. That was apparently Kurt Russell taking the controls because the helicopter pilot they had didn't care. And he even supposedly offered to crash his helicopter if they paid him enough money so they could get a good shot of a helicopter crashing and exploding. That offer was turned down, as far as I can tell. And this might be the greatest dog acting in a film ever. Even the cast and crew were unnerved by the quality of the dog acting. Jed was a consummate professional. Oh, Nowls. And the song you can hear now, Superstitious by Stevie Wonder. They lost the rights to this after the film was released, and for some VHS copies of the film, could not get the rights against it, replaced with another song, but then they got it restored for DVD versions. And that right there is just a perfect encapsulation of why licensing issues are horrendous. Because the song Superstitious, it's very literal in its use, but it is symbolic of what's happening in the film. Like, it's one of those things that gets a film student thing of like, ooh, what? This is a film about suspicion. What should we call, or what song should we be playing in this scene? Superstition. And here it is. The most unnerving scene in the entire film, in my opinion. Because I don't know about folks listening at home, but I've had pets, I've had dogs, and there is nothing scarier than when your dog acts like this. Just completely at odds with what you'd think its natural reaction will be in that situation. It's very, very unnerving. And you notice there was a fade. There's a lot of fades in this film. The editor, whose choice that was again mocked for using so many fades. Others in the industry made fun of them for relying on fades, such a juvenile filmmaking technique, even though John Carpenter himself fully supported the decision and use of fades as he felt it was thematically appropriate, because he didn't want scenes to just end. He wanted them to blend into one another. Hence the use of a fade. But no, just made fun of endlessly for relying on fades. And here we have the Norwegian camp. The fact about this one is they didn't build a separate new camp. This is actually the American camp from the end of the film. So they did actually build this entire location and then blow it up. And after they'd blown it up, for the film's climax, they shot this scene. So again, clever reuse of materials they already had. And just by shooting it from different angles and from different locations, you can make it look like an entirely new location. And this is one of the things that genuinely blew my mind when I researched it for this commentary track. I was baffled. I was like, how did I not notice it's just the American camp again? It's because John Carpenter is good at what he does. And there's been a lot of theories and fan theories thrown around about what a lot of the stuff in this scene means. And I choose to usually side with the director. I consider them to be the authority on the movies that they make. John Carpenter has gone on record as saying nothing in this scene matters. There is no message trying to be put across. It's just they threw shit at the wall to see what would stick, as it were. They just went around the wreckage of the location they built and just threw some debris around to make it like a struggle had happened. And this was apparently a huge problem. So it's like the Axe here, for example, when they made the 2011 prequel, because they had to go through this film frame by frame and recreate all of this. And they had to come up with justifications for why, for example, there was an axe in that wall. And I find it kind of amusing that you go back to when the film was being made and John Carpenter, there was no rhyme or reason behind why he did it. He didn't care. There was no thought put into why there's an axe in that wall. He just thought it was a good visual, so he put an axe in that wall. And the people making the prequel had to think, why would there be an axe in that wall, and write the film so that there'd be a scene where that axe enters that wall. Because if they didn't, fans of the original would be like, well, there's got to be an axe in that wall, even though John Carpenter had no reason for there being an axe in that wall. Same thing with this guy here. Carpenter just thought it'd be a good shot, good visual. And there's been endless fan debate about what's going on with this guy. So we're going to go wait for the camera to pan so we can see. See, there's another really strong visual. And building tension, man, not letting you see. Guy slits his wrist, but the idea there, look at that. The blood from his wrist froze before it even hit the ground. And that's the thing. This guy slit his wrist and his throat. That is a deep cut to the throat. And I can't even remember the prequels of what happened to this guy. But the whole point is that you're supposed to build up something in your head, just like the character's doing right now. So it's not particularly important what happened here. It's more about what you think happened in this scene. And just the idea that some guy would rather kill themselves than deal with whatever happened here is a much scarier thought to me than if they explicitly laid out what happened to the dude. And just all the little, my odds and bobs dot around. Like the fact that the place is still smoking, which shows that this thing just happened. Although I'm kind of confused about why the guys have a shotgun. Because this is supposed to be like a research team in Antarctica, and as far as I'm aware, they don't have shotguns when they're out there. Maybe they do. Maybe someone can correct me on that one, because I know sometimes when they're out in the Antarctic, they need some kind of weapon to fend off bears and things like that, but specifically a pump-action shotgun seems like a pretty inefficient choice for scaring away a bear. And Kurt Russell is not wearing a hat in this scene, but this actor here, I don't know any of the actors' names, I'm sorry guys. There's a lot of characters in this film, and a lot of them get killed super early on, very hard. I know Kurt Russell and I know Keith David, but you'll see he's not wearing a hat, even though realistically he'd be wearing a hat or a balaclava or something like that, and it's just because Kurt Russell's the main character. Main character doesn't wear a hat. You got to have his face on display. And that's one of those movie-making contrivances. You have to accept things like that. It doesn't fit the logic of the world, but you accept it for the sake of the film. So realistically, they should both be bundled up to fuck, and you wouldn't be able to see their face, and all you'd hear is just as they were trying to speak through a muffled balaclava. But you accept it when Kurt Russell was so rad. Oh, and here, go. One of the stronger practical effects in the film, in a film full of amazing practical effects. It might be. It's two men. Because I believe everything in this movie does have a name. But they're normally just called, they are all just called some variation of something, suffix, thing. So you have like the split face thing, the Norris thing, the Childs thing, the Blair thing. And I kind of like that. I like the idea of the thing as a creature. And the actual reasoning for the name as well, the thing. You might be wondering, like, why is it called the thing? Because there's probably people out there wondering, oh, look, Jed. It's so unnerving. Because it just doesn't move. Dogs shouldn't act like that. And that's one of the things I like about the thing as a creature. It's like when it's not having to pretend to be the creature it is impersonating, it doesn't move. Because it only will move with absolute efficiency in mind. Oh, that's crispy. So it's the split face thing. And Wilford Brimley there is having to act as if he's disgusted. He, in real life, did not care. He was very, very nonchalant about all the guts and gore, having worked with it frequently in his own life. Oh yes, but so the reason it's called The Thing, it's based on a novel called Who Goes There? This is seen to be a more direct and truthful adaptation of Who Goes There than there was a 1950s adaptation, which the thing is just a guy closer to a Frankenstein's monster than this parasitic, like alien monstrosity. He doesn't have any imitative abilities. He's just a guy. And when John Carpenter and co were throwing around ideas for what to call it, it's like, well, how would you describe it? It's just a thing. Just a thing. And the same is true of the prequel, which I don't like that it's called The Thing, but their reasoning was that if we called it The Thing 2 or Thing Begins, everything sounds cringy. The only title that works is The Thing. And I actually fell for that because I have The Thing 2011 on Blu-ray, thinking it was this dog! It's so terrifying. So I had The Thing 1982 on DVD, which is what I'm watching now. It's the special edition DVD. Oh god, that's so mean. That's so fucking mean. And this character is called Windows because the actor is wearing sunglasses. The actor picked his own name and apparently walked on set and just said, I'm Windows because I wear glasses, and that was the end of it. So his character's called Windows. Which to me is just hilarious. So we've got just Tywin Lannister up in this. So, of course, referencing the scene in Game of Thrones where terrifying Man Mountain Charles Dance cuts open a deer with a knife while giving a speech. Bonus facts, that is actually Charles Dance actually butchering a real deer. He was trained how to do it on the day. I do wonder how you'd react. So these are real animal guts. They're not human guts, but they are actual animal guts. That's just a bad time. And again, you don't need to know what happened here. You don't need an explanation for how this split face thing came to be, because your imagination is going to be way more terrifying. Just like that is just clearly two humans just violently merged into one another. That in of itself is a horrifying concept. You don't need to explain it, but they did in the prequel, and it's awful. This is apparently a real thing they do up in Antarctic research bases. And they have I think they do have internet connections now, but back in the day they didn't. There we go. Just something I never noticed as a child. He's getting high. It's important later, but I'll talk about that. But apparently in Antarctic research bases, they do just watch movies. And one of the movies they watch is The Thing. Oddly enough, very famously, they watch The Thing and The Shining as a double feature before they close for the summer. And they have no access to supplies and stuff for a couple of months. And it's apparently one of the most beloved traditions at one of the research bases out there, just to watch The Thing and The Shining as a double feature. It shows that scientists do have a sense of humour. And look at it. And I think this is the moment as well, just as I've gotten older, I just appreciate more because the amount of effort that must have gone in. Again, just Jed doing his job flawlessly. And I find it kind of hilarious now, realising it, that I know the name of the dog actor, but not the actor playing his handler. Because to me, this dog is a better actor than any of the other ones in the film. And they're all fantastic, but just this dog has more memorable scenes. And just this moment here. And it reminds me a little bit of the film The Guest, if anyone out there has seen that, where again, it's another film where it's deliberately ambiguous about what the main guy is. And there's a scene in that where he walks into a bedroom and he just sits down. It's this guy with like just nebulously defined superpowers. And he just walks into a room and just sits down and stares at the wall in complete silence, like this dog is doing now. And a description I saw, which I apply to this dog here, is that when it knows it's not being observed, it doesn't move. It conserves as much energy as possible. Oh! So we have here the dog thing. So this is Stan Winston helping the special effects supervisor, this one, Rob Bottin, who did pretty much all of the effects save this one. It's kind of a shame for like Rob Bottin, because his work in this is amazing, incredible. But this thing, the dog thing, is the most iconic thing in the movie because of how horrible it is. Like, Stan Winston knocked this shit out of the park. And like, look at these dogs as well, just amazing acting. And these dogs were not harmed by this, but they apparently would be very difficult to grab when they were sprayed down and would run around. So they had to grab them, towel them off, and put them in for other scenes. But yeah, Stan Winston did this particular, I believe, gag is the term they use in the industry, at the behest of Rob Bottin, who contacted him before production. He was worried that he would just not have enough time to finish all of the effects that he... Oh, just throwing dogs at man. I love the idea of just throwing a dog at someone like Point Break. And Stan Winston was kept on retainer by Bottin and was told, like, if I need help, will you come help me work on this? And he got to the work on the dog things that I can't do it. So he got Stan Winston in, and Stan Winston, being a nice guy, refused any credit because he didn't want to detract away from what Rob Bottin had done. He still gets a credit at the end of the movie, though. I think they say with special thanks to Stan Winston. And Rob Bottin is a very interesting figure. He's a fascinating individual. He's a ginormous man. I think he's 6'8". And he's just one of those figures, very enigmatic, very just aggressively weird. What a line. Mac wants the flamethrower. And the story goes that while promoting this film, because the effects were just as big a character as everybody else, he promoted it wearing an E.T. t-shirt. And 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 there's apparently some drama between E.T. and The Thing, which I'll get to in a moment after we just talk more about this scene, because it's just flawlessly executed. Just this writhing mass of just pulsating flesh, like no discernible form. Just this inhuman scream of just a billion sentient life forms. You can see it there, just spreading out these tendrils. And the way you do effects like this is it's done in reverse. So you pile up all of the gooey tendrils onto the prop, you pull them off, just put the footage in reverse, and it looks like the tendrils are reaching out to grab them. Just, And as someone with a pet dog, this guy's reaction is 100% understandable. But it's awful. But hauntingly beautiful. Like, in a way. Just the way it was constructed, I mean. Like, the amount of thought and effort that went into this to create just, like, this horrible monstrosity. And here we are. You see just eyes, like human eyes. There's so many details that you miss on a first watch. But one I'm going to point out here is what is now known as, keep an eye out, they're dog tongues. That is a blink and you'd miss it shot. I think Rob Bottin referred to it as like the angry sunflower or something like that particular effect there. It is, I want to say, like half a second shot. That is painstakingly modelled dog tongues in a flower shape. And it's on screen for 1 second, and then they shoot it with a flamethrower. Literally days, weeks, months of work up in smoke for a 1.5 second shot. And you can see why Rob Bottin nearly had a nervous breakdown making this film. Just countless hours of work were just set on fire. And that's the work of a special effects wizard, mage in his case, like elder wizard. I want to say the guy is just a genius at what he does. But he probably worked 7-day weeks for months straight, sleeping under his desk in the studio to try and get as many effects as he could. And I do wonder though, just this thing as well, like, that it has no discernible shape. It's just this rotting mass of just gelled together features and just indiscriminate body parts. And one thing I will invite people to do if they have an opportunity is go look at some of that, the concept art for these various things, because they're all incredible. And there's so much stuff on the cutting room floor for the thing that just never got realised. Apparently there's going to be a huge big the scene at the end was meant to be a lot more involved, and even a classic like The Thing cannot escape Exposition Man. And I do wonder what the goal of The Thing was there. It's always confused me. It's another source of contention among fans of, like, why did the dog thing? Why didn't it just stay in disguise as a dog? Because it's established that it is smart enough, The Thing, I say, is smart enough to avoid detection and only defends itself when absolutely necessary. And I guess you could argue like the other dogs knew that it was a thing, but it didn't need to kill them, I don't think. It's impossibly well behaved. Just a dog. And this is where the suspicion starts. And like, Blair is like a villain in this movie, but all of his reasoning and justification of what he does, it's understandable. It's one thing I like about The Thing, where it's a horror movie that is not reliant on people being stupid. So many horror movies are reliant on people being stupid or making obvious mistakes. Like, all the characters in this movie act in perfectly rational ways with the information they have at the time. And when they learn new information, they use it and apply it. Also, that's one of the stupidest lines ever. We just found a fucking alien. It's like, we can't learn anything from the evidence we gathered from their camp. I don't understand why that line's in the film. That's an alien. But that line always cracked me up of like, we can't learn anything from this. It's like, really? We can't learn anything from these guys? Just a tad. And that must have been fun to film, because you have to get all these shots here. You do it. No one tells Kurt Russell what to do. And yeah, just for this scene here, this is the helicopter pilot, and I'm not sure what scene he offered to just crash the helicopter, but in my head, it was the first time they flew, and just every time one of the other actors had to get into the helicopter with him, they had that in mind, that he was willing to crash the helicopter for a shot. Like, he was going to do it for the Vine. Like, unstoppable. Like, are you sure you don't want me to crash the helicopter? It's like, please don't crash the helicopter, Mr. Helicopter Pilot. I'd rather you didn't destroy the helicopter, the only way we can get, out of here alive. Yay. So it is Antarctica. I did get that one right. That's a check. So, we're just like, oh, that fade. Look at that. See, that fade works so well. It's so snowy out. It's so snowy and cold. That's a matte painting. And I miss matte painting so much. Because you can tell. You can tell that's not a real thing. If you zoom in on the Blu-ray version, you can tell that it's a painting. But it still looks really good. It still holds up. This film is nearly, I want to say, 1982, 40 years old. Like, the 40th anniversary is sometime this year. That still holds up. That still looks good, especially when it's like used in tandem with a practical effect like this one. And anyone who's a fan of the Fact Fiend channel will know that I have talked many, many times about my love of practical effects. I don't hate CGI, but I feel it is a tool that should be used sparingly. And one of the more baffling things about practical effects and stuff like matte paintings is that they are cheaper. By and large, they are cheaper than CGI, and better, in my opinion, because the actors have something tangible to act alongside. Ooh. And this is a scene that causes another bunch of fan speculation, like, who's that third guy? You never actually get to see who that third guy is. Like, they just stood off in the distance. And I did have it on my notes of who that third guy is, but I didn't deem it necessary to mention it. So I'm just going to, guess who that third guy is. I tried to research as best I could, folks at home. But another source of contention that I thought was more interesting is, who was piloting the spaceship? Because you find out in the thing, the prequel version anyway. There was going to have a deleted scene where they showed that it was being flown by an alien race, and that the thing was a captive of it. Yeah, you fucking tell him, Keith David. But I don't ascribe to the prequel being all that accurate, because John Carpenter doesn't really like the prequel. There's a famous quote from him when he was asked, is it true that you gave your blessing to the prequel? And his response is, that is inaccurate. And in fact, John Carpenter does not like the prequel, as far as I can tell in my research. And he considers that the Dark Horse comics to be a true sequel to it, which is odd, because in other interviews he's also talked about the video game being a direct sequel, and they contradict each other. What what a line. Yeah! The first ever cinematic Keith David motherfucker. And here it is. Just characters acting rationally. It's like, what is it doing? How am I supposed to fucking know it's an alien? And as I mentioned, there were a couple of fan theories, like, was the alien, or the fan queries are, was the alien driving the craft? Was it a passenger? Was it a prisoner? And there is no right or wrong answer. It's up to you folks at home. And this is a very obvious insert shot, added at the behest of producers and the studio, who felt that we needed some kind of visual representation of how the thing takes people over. Even though we have an explanation of that exact thing early in the film from Wilford Brimley. But the studio felt that we needed just it quite literally spelled out to us in black and white and red. And I'm not the biggest fan of that. I always err on the side of just treat your audience as if they're smart enough to understand what you're trying to tell them. And again, all this here, insert shots, it's handled much better in the novelisation, I feel. In the novelisation for the film, they have Blair's character, I believe it's Blair, talking about the idea of just, it will take over the world if it continues in this way. And it's his theory, which is like one of the explanations why he goes insane, because he thinks that's what will happen, but he doesn't know. But with this scene in the film, it's pretty firmly established that that is what's going to happen, because the computer tells him, and why would the computer lie? And it's one of those little additions I'm not a fan of. I'd much prefer the film to remain ambiguous. And I feel that if they're going to put an insert shot in, maybe just have that character sketching on a piece of paper so you know that it's just their best guess, not a computer simulation. In the 1980s, computers were basically magic. That thing can see the future, make you coffee, all that bollocks. So I just feel it's a weakness of the film to have something a film that's so heavily based on being ambiguous by design and having it all up to your own interpretation of what's going on, to just have something so blatantly spelled out for you, the audience. Oh, no. And there's something you notice, not as a kid, but as an older, McCready is drunk in every single scene. And there are fan theories that the reason the thing doesn't go for him is because he's got so much alcohol in his blood, it's seen as poison. The thing sees it as poison and does not go and assimilate him. Which is, I think, while interesting and amusing, isn't that accurate, I feel. Because character here, we saw him earlier in the film, smoking weed. It is the opinion of John Carpenter that the thing is high when it takes over them. Spoilers, they get assimilated later. Just a fantastic shot there. Horror movie staple, but it's not quite dead yet. It just really lends itself to that, just a constant nagging feeling of paranoia and dread throughout the entire film. Of just the fact that you can't even kill this thing. Even just being partly incinerated is not enough to stop the thing from getting you. I wonder if it's because he's just seeing the theoretical potential end of all of humanity. Yes. And this, I mean, you don't need that computer simulation. Just this alone is enough to instill the same sense of dread in you as the character feels. And again, the computer simulation just spelling it out for you, it feels so just antithetical to what the film is trying to say. But it's actually more interesting if you don't know for sure that that's the case up until you learn that it actually isn't. I love this shot. Oh, it's a great shot, and just because I feel that's what we'd all be like that. Bennings, that's the guy's name. So there is a lot of names in this film, folks. I'm more interested in the behind the scenes information. It's more like as well, where did the juice go? Where did the juice go? There was a lot of like liquid when Bennings was getting taken, and it's all gone. And we're about to get to yet another part. I'm going to say this a lot throughout the film, but there are so many moments in this film that fans argue about what exactly is going on. And we have this moment here of, what is the creature trying to do here? It's an amazing shot. Great moment. Just this awful animalistic cry. And the two main theories fans have is that it's not quite assimilated Bennings enough yet to communicate. So its vocal cords aren't fully formed, and therefore it just screams because it doesn't know how to do it. Or the other one is that it's alerting the other things using an alien language that we as humans do not understand. I personally choose to believe the first one. That it's not quite fully assimilated him yet, so it's unable to communicate properly. And that it's actually trying to beg for mercy, but it's not assimilated the guy enough to know how to speak English, and its vocal cords are not fully formed. Here it is, good old fire. And I always found just this explanation for how to destroy the thing a little bit wanting. And I feel it's a contrivance of just the movie making, where they have, earlier in the film, they have the computer simulation of a single cell assimilating an entire being, an entire creature. And they establish that the split face thing is still alive after being partly incinerated. And I feel like even this level of fuck you would not be enough to destroy every single cell. I have cremated some chicken fingers in my time in my oven, and there's always still a little bit of meat in there. Although I do think this scene a great detail, especially considering what happens later in the film with the blood test, would have been for the creature to start screaming again when they burn it. But I can understand why they don't, because they don't want to play their hand in that regard just yet. But I feel if the creature started screaming as if it was still alive, that would have been a great moment, a very unsettling one. And now Kurt Russell wears a balaclava. And this was me, I'd wear that the entire film. As soon as I learned that this creature has to have like direct skin to skin contact, or like some bodily fluid or some open orifice to sneak into, I'll be wearing a balaclava the entire time. Here it is, Kurt Russell. Just being a hero, figuring it all out. That's all you need. It's that one glance back. That one glance back is all you need for Kurt Russell's character, and just fuck yeah, flamethrower baby. I love that. It's just a guy just slowly jogging with a fire axe. And I say it, folks, but another fan theory is this Blair being a thing, or is this Blair being paranoid? That's one of the things I love about So that you don't quite know when some people get assimilated, because the actions of Blair make sense if he's both a thing right now or if he's still being human. Like, destroying the helicopter is something a thing would do to make sure no one can escape and alert people to his presence. But it's also something a paranoid motherfucker who does not want a thing to escape would also do. It's one of those, it's like almost Jaws-like, the film Jaws, where even when you know what's going on in those films, you've seen it, even if you've seen it a dozen times, when exactly the shark strikes still surprises you because of how well crafted everything is. It's the same when you're watching The Thing, where you can watch this film twice on the bounce and go into it. Like, watch this scene now and just imagine that Blair's a thing. It's different to if you're watching it if he's just a person who's insane. Just, yeah, old man swinging a fire axe. And we have another great example here of just characters acting in a way that is relatable, just a way that makes sense. And it's something I kind of wish you'd see more in films, because it's a really smart way of stopping a guy with a fire axe. Oh, that's such a harsh line. Like, he killed the dogs with a fire axe. Yeah, and I do wonder. Here's an exercise for you folks at home. If you transplanted this cast into another horror movie, how well would they do? Because the fact they're so pragmatic and they're so smart, and they're just so competent, and they only fail because the thing is fucking baller. But this scene here, and I've never seen them try this in something else. Just throwing a gun, what a hero. Like, just run it with a table. And I've never seen that in any other film. And it's like when you watch World War Z. Oh god, those two hits. But when you watch World War Z and Brad Pitt's character duct tapes magazines to his arm and runs at the zombies and just shoves the magazines into their mouth so they can't bite him. And you think that's so clever. That is such an easy, like, low-cost solution. That is basically infinite, like the amount of times you can do that. And they never do it again. That's rough. It's rough, buddy. It's like, oh, when you're watching Walking Dead and they cover themselves in zombie guts and it near 100% of the time stops the zombies from attacking them, and they don't think to just do that constantly. I want one in my shit. Don't drink my whiskey. And again, just decisions made using the best. It's the best decision made in the situation given what they all know at this point in time. And when they learn new information, they change. And I love that they leave him just like a tot of vodka. Just to stave off the heat. Or the cold, I should say. No, Kurt Russell. So that is something it's worth keeping an eye out for. Like, Kurt Russell is drinking in nearly every scene. And as I said, I don't buy into the theory that him being drunk is the reason the thing doesn't take him over. But it is kind of, like, amusing to think about. And this is where, like, is this just this character being paranoid, or is it they're a thing drawing suspicion away from themselves by pointing towards another thing? It's like that, the idea of, like, if you're a spy, be as visible and obnoxious as possible, and then so that to draw people off your scent, as it were, of, like, act as suspicious as possible to draw suspicion away. Because, oh, well, the thing wouldn't act like that, which the thing might know, because it's taken over a very smart character and it gains access to their memories and knowledge. And that's a really good question. That's an argument all the actors and cast had. And for anyone curious, I'm going to defer to the word of John Carpenter once again. He thinks, I have a quote from him somewhere down here. So he believes that even if a person knows they're a thing, it wouldn't matter, because in his words, a thing imitated human would still express outrage at being accused perfectly convincingly. So he believes that a thing imitating a person would know that they are a thing, but it would not matter, because as a perfect imitation, it would be able to perfectly emulate being accused of being a thing, and also be able to act in a way that would be in keeping with that actual person's genuine reactions for any given scenario. So basically, it doesn't matter. But it was supposedly something the actors argued about a lot, and it gets misconstrued a lot of the actors being confused about whether or not they were a thing, and it was more just how should they act in any given scene. And John Carpenter just told them, act everything straight. Just imagine that you are your character throughout the entire thing, because it wouldn't matter if you were a thing or not in any given scene. And I'm unfortunately unable to say who got to the blood. It is a huge plot hole, because they talk about there's only a couple of characters who could have done it. And it doesn't make sense for any of the people who in this scene are able to access the blood to have destroyed the blood. And that's because it's for the sake of a visual in the film. They have the blood still running out of the fridge, which means that it had just happened, which is impossible given what we later learn is the current population of things in the base. And it turns out in the original script, and I believe the novel, the blood is supposed to have been dried. So that it leaves it a little bit more open into interpretation. So it could have been there for a couple of hours. So it could have happened a long time. But when you walk into the scene and the blood is still in the process of leaking out, it can only just have happened. So it's kind of a plot hole, and fans have argued for a long time about what is going on, obviously who did it, because it doesn't really make sense. No one could have really gotten to it in time and then gotten out of the room for it to still be leaking out like that. And it's just one of those things, it's a story contrivance. He's got a point. It's like, just Kurt Russell being reasonable. I'd listen to Kurt Russell. I'd listen to Kurt Russell's beard in this moment. If he told me to put the gun down, I'd put the gun down. It's great. But I ain't one of those fucking things. And that's the one of putting the gun down. And that right there is, it's a very subtle thing. I'd argue too subtle, that character has a heart condition. And it was more explicit in the script and the novelization that character has a heart issue. But according to John Carpenter, that one line of him saying, I'm not up to it, is enough to establish that character just has a heart condition. I don't see it personally, but I'm not going to argue with John Carpenter. But just the act of them saying, I'm not up to it, in John Carpenter's opinion, is to show that they can't deal with the stress of being in charge. What we have here is just the confidence that's born from being drunk. And one of the things I like is just every character has their face covered by a different amount. They all have just different parts of their face covered up to be representative of how much or little they're concealing from Kurt Russell in this moment. Just it's more like first year film stuff, but I love it. Like when it's pointed out to you, you're like, oh, that makes perfect sense, but it's still kind of neat because someone had to think about it and put this in place. And you can see how much people are being guarded. Like there's characters who've got like the full huddle. Like the guy on the left there, he's going like full Kenny McCormick. And there's just something about the fact he's threatening them with a flamethrower that's so much scarier than if it was just a gun. Because that's gonna hurt. Like, that's gotta be rough on it. Just Keith David with a flamethrower. And I believe that is just a real needle going to someone's arm, just saline, I believe. Don't know why they had to get that shot, but they supposedly did. And yeah, Kurt Russell really is. He's drinking in every single scene. He's just pissed out of his tree this entire time. And this is why it's my comfort movie. Just watch it and take a drink every time Kurt Russell takes a drink. You will be hammered by the end of this movie. You will be in exactly the right frame of mind to watch this movie, in my opinion. Nobody trusts. It's almost like you've been pointing a flamethrower at everyone's head for the last 20 minutes. Nobody trusts each other. That's just the tagline for the film. Nobody trusts each other. And it's something that's kind of left on the cutting room floor for this. You'll notice that Kurt Russell's character wears a lot of military fatigue style clothes. And he's drinking, speaking of which, maybe. I guess that's a moment, because I love this moment. Again, just a character being really smart. Yep. A really smart, sensible solution. Like, no character in this film is a moron. They act impulsively. They act emotionally. But they do not act in a way that is outside their own characterization or best judgment. But R.J. McCready, the character, you'll notice the way I look at more military fatigues. In the script, they were supposed to be a helicopter pilot from the Vietnam War. And they're supposed to have PTSD. So we don't actually know who that is. That's an extra. John Carpenter specifically didn't want anyone to tell who that was, so he had an extra put on a coat and walk past. Yeah, it's McCready's backstory. It's never mentioned in the film. I guess it's kind of alluded to by the fact he's wearing the fatigues and he's drunk all the time. Is that he's a Vietnam helicopter pilot with PTSD, and that adds a lot more weight to the line. I'm a really light sleeper. You see there. And as well, there's things, even the Thing's smart in this, where the Thing's trying to assuage people's suspicion by placing it onto the one person who can out it. And that's how it starts. That's all you need, one line. Because that's how you be. I don't want to be alone. Realistically, they should all move as a group. They should all move as just one effective unit. Like they should just become like the ball. And they should all have a shotgun pointed at the back of each other's heads and walk in a circle the entire time. But I guess they can't do that because otherwise a film wouldn't happen. That's like the one thing they do that I don't think makes sense. Is like, realistically, they should never split up, ever. Like, regardless of how long it takes to get anything done, they should all move together all the time. This is a great visual coming up. Just the noose in the foreground. It's like, yeah. It's like, I'm fine. And it's another scene where you can interpret it differently, whether or not you believe in this moment he is a thing. If he's a person, is it that he's trying to play on their sympathy and that he's legitimately having a mental break because he can hear people, a thing, outside? Or is it a thing trying to trick them? And it's doing what it thinks is the best way to emotionally manipulate the people who will come in. So apparently as well, that was a huge problem. Those flares got very, very hot. So when you see them like cast them aside like that, that is the actors are legitimately throwing them aside. They really did hurt if they went all the way down. And they only lasted about 60 seconds. We have another moment here. You're not ever really supposed to know what happened here. I should speak about this because one of the things that I adore this film. I adore talking about this film. I adore thinking about this film. One of the things that's baffling to me, researching it and talking about it with other fans, is that they seem to want definitive answers to things like why did Fuchs burn himself? Like, you're not supposed to know. You're supposed to feel just as helpless and confused as the characters in the film. That's the whole point. But you can talk about it, you can endlessly speculate and all that good stuff, but the idea that fans want definitive answers, and a lot of the interviews I've read with like John Carpenter, you can tell that he's dealt with this a lot because one, he's really sarcastic and he trolls fans a lot when they ask him questions about the film, because almost every interview I read with him about this film is people just asking him, what does insert thing mean? What was happening in this moment? And every time his answer is just, well, it doesn't matter. Or sometimes he's in a mood to troll. And the same is true of the actors as well. For example, Keith David has been asked probably hundreds of times, but at least a dozen when I was researching the whole thing. Who do you think survived at the end of the thing? And he's gotten to the point now his stock answer is, well, I know for sure I ain't a fucking thing. Just as a joke, but people take that seriously and take it to mean that he's not a thing, even though the actor is. He's clearly joking. Ooh, having a heart attack. He's having a rough ass day. That's just scary. It's a great visual. Just running through the snow. Just like the slow, like, loping gait from side to side. And that thing, so it's that idea there of cutting someone loose in the middle of a blizzard. That's a rough thing to do to somebody. Planet there. You cut it. It's just so fucking rough. So, minor spoilers right here. Two of the people in this scene are a thing. And I can't help but... I saw it! It's such a good shot! It's like proper horror movie shit. So, spoiler, like, Palmer is a thing. So in this moment, it's like, oh, is the fact that the thing would be willing, because in this moment, you don't know, like, is McCready a thing or not, but the idea that the thing will even sacrifice another part of itself to maintain its cover. It's a really interesting thing about the Thing as a villain, as a creature that it is willing to sacrifice a part of itself to maintain the life of the whole. It's almost like those lizards that will like abandon a part of their tail. It's like lose a minor part of yourself, or the whole remains. Oh god, the frozen beetle. There it is. Look, the Kurt Russell. Fuck you. Fuck you. You didn't win. In his behaviour, that is fully just signposted right at the start of the film. Like the chess wizard. It beats him, just destroys the entire thing. And I love like the makeup work here as well on Kurt Russell's face, because he doesn't look human. Like, in this one, you can believe that he's a thing. It's like just that hauntingly pale face and the gaunt eyes. So these shots here were very difficult to achieve, because the flare would only last for about a minute, and they would get very close to burning the actors' hands. So they'd have to like redo a lot of these shots, just because the flare would go out. We'd have to do another one. Oh, that's rough. So if anyone's ever been stuck out in the cold and had this happen to them, that's just a rough day. Probably one of the more famous shots in the entire thing. Also one of like the more impressive practical effects, and I think everyone knows how it was done, but I will talk about it just in case someone misses it. Now, he's got a point. But this to me, it's similar to the Jaws moment, where the head pops out from underneath the boat. Even though you know it's going to happen, it's still surprising when it does, because of just the build-up for the scene. And you never quite know if it's the first one or the second one that does it. So, the effect here is, this is a amputee wearing a mask of the actor's face. I think it's one of the most well-known practical effect bits in the film, but it's worth pointing out in case people didn't know. That is a double amputee. They've got a mask of the actor's face. Put it over it, because it's only there for such a short amount of time, and because your eyes are naturally drawn towards the two stumps where his arm used to be, you don't notice that it's a mask. And this right here is bubblegum. Bubblegum. The effects crew spent an entire afternoon chewing the bubblegum for this bit. Rob Bottin and his crew said their jaws hurt like hell afterwards. And then also while making this scene, they settled this entire effect, and they were using gas to get the smoke and the steam effects, and they blew up. So the first time they tried to do this effect, the entire thing blew up, and Rob Bottin had to do it all over again. And he's in good spirits when he talks about it on the behind the scenes interviews, but you can tell he's pissed. Just weeks of work blew up in his face, and he was just told, do it again. And I wish there was more of this in the film. The thing splitting up into smaller things. But I understand why they didn't, just for the sake of like the budget. It would have been nightmarish. And the line coming up here is one they wanted to cut out. That's a fight to keep this line in the film. They did not want it, and I believe it was Kurt Russell himself who insisted upon keeping it in. So apparently that made Kurt Russell laugh every single time. So they left it in at his behest, and he insisted on leaving it in. And The reason why a lot of fans don't like that line is because Palmer is a thing. And I like it because it shows that the thing is willing to sacrifice part of itself to survive. But there are like fan discussions out there of like, why did the Palmer thing draw attention to the smaller thing? Like, surely it's got the most chance of surviving if it let the thing escape, because it almost gets away. And it's like, but no, it's a tactic, isn't it? Because if it can convince them that, oh, you did get all of it, maybe Kurt Russell would not burn them all to death with a flamethrower. But it turns out that Kurt Russell is just that paranoid and he will burn them with a flamethrower or shoot them in the face. You tell him, Keith David. Are you going to shoot Spawn? Are you really going to be responsible for shooting Spawn? Oh, he's the president. That's just a rough time. It's so harsh that he makes him tie into the table. It's another part of the film where this decision's being made. It's the best course of action in that situation. Like, they're dead. Well, that didn't stop the split face thing. That looked the most dead of anything. And it still got out. And I love that. Every character has a different reaction here. Like, just abject fear from Knowles here. Just blood. Oh, damn it, I almost had the line right. And in the original novel, this is a lot more in-depth, this explanation. And I wish I had it in front of me because it's really, really good at explaining what's about to happen. But I'm able to go track down the novel on their own if they like it. And does he need that much blood? That shot always just, it makes me wince every time. It's like, do you need to slice it with a scalpel? Could he not just like do the pinprick? And this always freaks me out as well, because we already learned that one cell of this thing in your bloodstream can infect you, and he cut that guy's thumb with a scalpel. Like, surely that's going to infect you. And if it's not going to give you like the thing, if you had any sort of like blood-based illness, you've just caught it, because he cleans the scalpel on his leg. I would not let him come out with that scalpel. And there are some readings of this film that talk about it being a metaphor for AIDS. I'm not sure how much I buy into that, but I welcome any interpretation like that in a film, because, you know, it makes discussions about it more interesting, even if you don't personally ascribe to it. It's still interesting to think about the idea of it being a metaphor for AIDS, a blood-borne illness that can get you. Oh, sorry, I'm just distracted by this scene here because I love the reaction from both these actors. And this is where Carpenter's insistence that actors play it completely straight is like just a genius decision. Because I especially love Niles' reaction, because I think this actor might nail relief more than I've ever seen any other actor nail relief. When he tests Niles' blood, anyway. Shit, you telling Keith David. Like, he's just so scared. He's so scared. And it's great. And the little detail here that lets you know who the thing is every character in this lineup has an eye light on them. It's just a filmmaking technique used to just draw attention to the eyes of an actor. Because, you know, eyes being the window to the soul, as it were, and the most expressive part of the person's face. Everybody has an eye light except for Palmer. And when you see his face, you'll notice that his eyes are distinctly more sunken in than other actors. See here, look. And that is just to make him look just look more inhuman. But this effect here as well. Oh, every time. It's great. But the way they did that there is it's a plastic hand. And I believe it's Rob Bottin's hand just explodes through. Covered in fake blood. But yeah, when Palmer thing there, I always read that as just that when he's looking and he just sighs, it's just the thing knowing that it's going to have to do this. It knows it only has like a couple of seconds before it's discovered. Like, oh, great acting here. I love this bit. It's great. Oh, Windows. And this is the only effect in the entire film I feel doesn't hold up. Not this one. This looks great. This one here, it's clearly a guy swinging around a rubber dummy. Of just... Because it looks great. Oh, it's the worst effect. It looked great if it wasn't for that. Just they didn't need to go as hard. Like it's so obviously a rubber dummy. It's because like the shot rate leaps against the ceiling, which was realized by you just shoot it in reverse. And they just got they got the dummy and they threw it down on the floor and just reversed the shot. That looks really good. This shot looks really good. This is a real guy who's actually on fire. He walks through this wall like tissue paper. There's a whole bunch of like fan speculation about why that wall's so thin. I believe like not the answer. Oh wait, mate, you'll see here. So Kurt Russell gets knocked on his ass in that shot. He did not know the explosion was going to be that big. There is a very famous bit of like behind the scenes footage where you hear Kurt Russell laughing about it and then yelling at the effects supervisor of like, fucking hell. I didn't realise it was going to be that bad. So you actually see him get knocked on his ass. But yeah, there's a lot of fan speculation at that moment there. Like, I think the answer fans was the thing's just super strong. Because realistically, those walls should be 4 foot thick to stop them all from freezing to death. So if you like me, and just look at that there. He's so scared. The relief on his face. Just this moment here, look. Just... It's so good. Just and then the smash cut to him with the flamethrower is perfect. Oh, it's like I struggle to name my favourite scene in this one. I think my favourite combination of shots is that one there. Just the smash cut to Niles holding the flamethrower after just the abject relief on his face. And this is a completely just relatable reaction. It's like, cut me the fuck loose. Again, smash cut to them both with flamethrowers. And just, you can see, like, the descriptor of, like, relief, like, pouring over him. Because if you watch that, it looks like the actor's shoulders just melt as the relief just hits him. There's so many just little acting moments in this film that I adore. Like this scene in particular is like a microcosm of why this film's so great. Of just all the little interactions, just the characters looking off into the distance and their various reactions of like the complete just no fucks given attitude of Childs, Keith David, just being like, doesn't believe it. Niall's been 100% on board from the start and just been petrified of what's going on. And then Palmer, as a thing, just the quiet acceptance of they're about to be found out. And in my head, in that moment, the thing is thinking of how to escape. And this is not any sort of confirmation here, but my fan speculation at that moment is the thing is deciding what would be the best thing to turn into to maximize its chances of survival. Which is why it immediately just leaps onto the ceiling after transforming and attacks the guy with the flamethrower. So like, my personal headcanon is that it turns into something similar to a human, so maximize its strength that it has. So that's why it can lift up windows so effortlessly and it can like crash through the wall. But whatever you choose to interpret that scene as, that's up to you too. So that's the beauty of this film, that you can't be right or wrong. about any real interpretation of any scene that goes on. That's especially prevalent with the ending, which I'm really looking forward to talking about. There's so much stuff to talk about in the end. But before that, we have to get to like just the best prop, which is the teeny, adorable baby spaceship. And I'm unsure how I feel about this part of the film. The idea that the Thing is building a spaceship to escape, but it builds the spaceship out of tractor parts and like helicopter pieces. This teeny tiny UFO. I on one hand, it suggests that the Thing is super intelligent, as you'd expect, and I believe the canon explanation for the intelligence of the Thing is that the larger a thing is, the smarter it is. And the novel I mentioned earlier, when they're talking about the blood test, they talk about how a larger thing would be able to survive such a test because it has higher reasoning and thought, and as a result, it has the ability to act against self-preservation instincts. However, because blood is just tissue, as McCready says, it doesn't have a nervous system. It doesn't have higher thought. It can act only on instinct, and that instinct is to survive. So the way things work is the larger it is, the more intelligent it is. But intelligent enough to build a tiny spaceship from tractor parts, I'm not sure I buy that. It's a cool visual. It's like go down there and say, wow, the Thing was trying to escape, but it doesn't really gel with anything else you see the Thing do throughout the movie. It acts largely as a monster. It's quite intelligent when it's impersonating somebody else, of course. You see it. It's like watching that scene back with Palmer, knowing he's a Thing. The fact that it's like, he's trying to play on the emotions and the paranoia of the other members of the crew to convince them to kill McCready. He's very intelligent, but there's a big leap from convincing people to flamethrower a comrade to building a spaceship. It wants to freeze. And this is the thing, when they talk about it, it wants to freeze. So realistically, Blair Thing could have just ran off. And I guess you have to accept that a movie needs to happen. So if this is the case, the Thing can just go lie down in the snow and freeze, it could have just ran off into the wilderness and waited, frozen and waited again. And I respect, and here we go. Here's Kurt Russell doing exactly as at the start of the film. The fuck you didn't win. That's the metaphorical glass of scotch being poured into the computer's, the chess wizard's exhaust port. Blow it all to hell. And these are all real explosions, really blowing up this set that they did build out there in British Columbia. And it makes the facts I mentioned earlier about the 2011 film, the fact that they had to painstakingly recreate the destroyed Norwegian base and try and guess what happened and like work backwards from the stuff you see in the film. The fact that just you watching this and learning about it, it's like, oh no, they just blew it up willy-nilly. There was no rhyme or reason to what they did. They just wanted to cause the most destruction possible. And they are actually running around throwing Molotov cocktails and blowing stuff up. There it is. Alcohol saving the day. It does make you think, though, how many bottles of scotch did R.J. McCready bring with him? Because he's got a lot. There's a lot of scotch in that man's bag load. It's like, at the very least, they could have grabbed some food. Just, man is tossing so much scotch. And I can't remember if it's this. I think this scene might be the last time we ever see Niles. It's the last time we ever see them. And they quite simply just disappear between shots. It might be this one and the next shot, but at some point over the next 5 minutes, Niles just disappears. And the reasoning is just they didn't have it in the budget. They had a death scene scripted. So it's really brutal. The final thing was going to grab them, and they were supposed to pop out of the ground midway through being assimilated. And scream in agony and be put out of their misery by MacReady. They just didn't have that in the budget, so as a result, Niles is one of the few characters whose fate in this film is ambiguous and undetermined. Because there is no direct confirmation anywhere in the film whether or not they died, and we clearly see that they are not a thing. Because they did the test earlier, and there's no opportunity for them to be assimilated by the thing, because they spend the rest of the film with MacReady. But they just disappear between takes, and it's never explained. No. You're all fucked. Like, that's such a great line. It's like it just took the entire generator. I guess since we're getting to the climax of the film, we'll talk about the several proposed sequels to this film. Like John Carpenter himself considers the either the video game or the Dark Horse comics to be proper sequels, depending on what day you ask him. Because I found multiple interviews with him where he talks about both being proper sequels, but there's differences in how they handle the story. And in the video game, MacReady survives. MacReady is one of the survivors, because the story of the video game is you have another research team trying to track down what happened here. They bump into a bunch of other things, and MacReady comes in at the very end and rescues them. He is the guy who rescues at the end, which confirms that he is absolutely not a thing. The Dark Horse comics, both Childs and MacReady survive, and they continue to encounter things. And I think Childs does become assimilated at some point, and MacReady goes insane, as to be expected after dealing with this, and he gets paranoid about random creatures being a thing. I love this bit. That actually got me. Like, that effect there! Oh, it's so good! That's all you need. And they try to, do that again in the prequel, and it just doesn't work as well, because they do it with CGI. With the fact that you just see the flesh, just melding together, it's such a good effect. But, in the Dark Horse comics, MacReady becomes just endlessly paranoid, and one comic, it looks so good. It's disgusting, but it looks amazing, and they just have many shots of MacReady looking outside and just seeing animals and be like, that's a thing. No, it's not, it's a thing. And it culminates in him going out into a field full of sheep, because he insists that there's a thing inside this field of sheep and just machine guns all the sheep to death. And then he gets arrested. It's you're going crazy, that those sheep weren't things. And then the sheep turn out to actually, they were things, and they attack him. But besides the comic and the video game, the proposed film sequel, that's Niles, he's gone. Never find out where he goes. I do kind of wish his death scene was filmed, because the concept art for it is incredible, and it'd be a brutal fucking death, but it'd be great to see it realised. And just Rob Bottin in interviews, the scant ones he's given, has just said, we didn't have time, didn't have the budget. I just physically could not work any harder than I did, so we had to cut a lot of things for time. And Niles' death was one of them. But the proposed filmic sequel is going to be made 20, 30 years later, and it was going to start with MacReady and Childs both being picked up, and they were both going to be survivors, and their age was going to be explained by them both having frostbite. So they were going to explain why Kurt Russell and Keith David had aged 20 years in the space of a few days by saying that severe frostbite had scarred them horribly. And while that's quite common, you'll see that proposed sequel suggested around the web. John Carpenter has often talked about, there was no real stop motion. That's not great stop motion work, to be honest. But I do like this. Yeah! Super rad. He's often talked about there wasn't really any serious thought put into that. It was just an idea in a script that was floating around somewhere. It was never seriously going to be considered. And here's just Rob Bottin, just his magnum opus This entire thing, the world's greatest combat role. This was going to be a lot more expansive as well. Yeah! Don't fuck him up, Kurt Russell. That was going to be a lot bigger, a lot more involved, and Rob Bottin just did not have time. He had so many ideas. And it makes me wish, not for a remake, like, you can't remake something like this. Don't remake good movies. But it's like a theoretical just remaster where you'd go back and you just rebuild the effects. Did you like George Lucas did, like the special editions, where he got to go in after the fact and just add new shit in? I want that treatment for stuff like The Thing, where there is, because with Star Wars, we know it's just George Lucas, or we knew it was just George Lucas, like just being full of himself and being fixated on fixing those films. But with something like this, there is literally things we can point to as being like left on the cutting room floor that were not able to be realised due to time and budget constraints. To go back and fix those mistakes, like give John Carpenter, Rob Bottin some money and tell them to just film those scenes, do those shots, get those effects built up, and insert them back into the film. I'd like to see that. And here we have it. So, this ending, one of the best endings to a film here, and there's many, many fan theories about who's the thing here. Get them all sorted out right away. So, they say you can't see Keith David's breath, so he's a thing. You can see Keith David's breath. If you're watching this on Blu-ray, you can see his breath in this scene. They say that Kurt Russell is actually got some gasoline in the whiskey bottle, and that he drinks out of that and he hands it off to the child, and child doesn't react. That's bullshit. It's not gasoline, it's whiskey. We see throughout the film that he's drinking whiskey. It's the same whiskey he drinks throughout the film, or the Scotch, I should say. John Carpenter's gone on record saying that's a stupid theory. It makes no sense. And the prequel ruins this as well, because the prequel establishes that the Thing cannot replicate anything artificial, such as an earring, which we can see Child's wearing in this scene. And there's also the actors themselves, both Kurt Russell and Keith David, have gone on record as saying they don't think they're a thing, but they understand that people might think they are. And then John Carpenter, in various interviews, has confirmed or denied whether or not Kurt Russell's a thing. In one interview I found, when he was asked, they asked him, so who's the thing at the end? He says, MacReady. And when they asked him really, he said, no, I'm bullshitting you. And then, and I quote, nobody knows. Which is the point, I think. Very poignant things of nobody knows. You're not supposed to know. And I can see why people would dislike this ending. It's very nihilistic. Just two men just toasting to their mutual hopelessness. And the story I told in the video once is that when John Carpenter did a screening of this, a lady came up to him and asked, so who was the thing at the end? John Carpenter responded, it's up to you. It's your own interpretation. You can, whatever you think the ending is what the ending is. And they said, I hate that. And I mentioned E.T. earlier in the film, so a few things to mention before we close off. There's this film opened the same week as E.T. and it premiered the same day as Blade Runner. And it is often suggested that audiences did not go and watch The Thing because E.T., which is one of the biggest films ever, offered a more hopeful view of what alien visitation would look like, and audiences were just not ready to accept these two conflicting visions. John Carpenter has gone, right, it's like, that's a silly theory. He's got more faith in audiences, although he probably shouldn't have, given everything that happened to his film after the fact. But yeah, that's one thing of just audiences didn't like E.T. But this film was savaged by critics on release. Many critics wrote it off as, I think one quote is instant trash. Instant trash. One critic even described it as the only thing it's worthwhile to serve as is an ad for JB Scotch, the Scotch that Kurt Russell drinks. There is Who Goes There? John W. Campbell Jr. The story's not that interesting. I much prefer the film because I'm a huge sci-fi nerd, but it's worth reading. There's also another novel. I believe it's called like Frozen Death or something like that. There's a novel that's an expanded version of Who Goes There. Basically, Who Goes There was like a short novel, and there was like 100 pages or so missing. And then they created like a fuller version of it, I want to say. It was like an expanded version of that novel that goes into more detail. That was released a couple of years ago, if anyone out there wants to track that down. If you're interested in the thing that inspired the thing. In regards to the critics, like a lot of people wrote the film off on release. It actually was disastrous for John Carpenter's career. He was contracted, I believe, for one more movie after this with the studio he was working with at the time, Universal. And rather than let him make that movie, the response to this was so awful. They bought him out of his contract and told him not to make movies for them anymore. And John Carpenter was understandably saddened by this. He was incredibly, incredibly disheartened by the response to his film. And in the years since, also I need to point out that the stunt coordinator's name was Dick Warlock. But yes, John Carpenter was very disheartened, and in the years since, like he has a pretty like great sense of humor as John Carpenter, very understated, subtle sense of humor, but and he's very laconic in the way he talks in terms of phrase. But when he was asked many years later about, well, after this film was finished, it didn't do well at the time, but people have come to appreciate it, and he's like, yeah, okay. And the quote that I think sums it up is he was speaking to Guillermo del Toro, I believe, and Guillermo del Toro was just gushing about how much they loved the thing. They watched it as a child. It's like, oh, it's great. And they went up and they talked to John Carpenter. They said, I know that the thing wasn't received very well on release, but anyway, special thanks to Stan Winston. If you're still watching the DVD or your Blu-ray copy, that was only put in at Rob Bottin's request. Stan Winston insisted on having no credit because he didn't want to detract from the work Bottin did, but they put it in anyway because of the amount they felt we can't not credit him for like making that amazing dog thing. But yes, anyway, Guillermo del Toro, or I think it was Guillermo del Toro, I should say. It's like, I might be misremembering the facts here, but it's besides the point. Spoke to John Carpenter, told him, I'm really sorry the film wasn't received well, but surely it makes you happy to learn that you've inspired an entire generation of filmmakers with your movie. And according to industry legend John Carpenter, turned around and says, how the fuck does that help me? And just that sums it up. And there's a couple of other quotes from John Carpenter. He's a very interesting man. It's like he's very very sarcastic. He doesn't really give a fuck, especially about his own movies, which I feel is the actually I think that was the film the song they use in lieu of Superstition. Yeah, they use Don't Explain, which I think Superstition works better, but John Carpenter's often been asked, there's been a lot of remakes of your work. Do you have anything to say about them? And he seldom has anything nice to say about the remakes and reimaginings of his work. He's very unkind about the Thing prequel, Assault on Precinct 13, and I think there's one other one he did, I don't recall off the top of my head. But he seldom has nice things to say about them, and his stock response to being asked, well, what's the process for you then when people want to remake one of your movies? John Carpenter usually just says that, well, I hold out my hand and money falls into it, and when the amount of money that falls into it is enough, then I give them my permission. And yay, the Universal logo, which they removed from the start of the film because they didn't want people to think that the planet that the film was taking place on was the Universal logo. That's actually what happened. Universal were worried that people would think that the planet Earth in Universal's logo is where the thing took place. And that more than anything just sums up how terrible studios are and why they should not be allowed to interfere with the director or creative's vision. But thank you very much, everyone at home, for joining me on this rambling adventure through the thing. I hope that I didn't ramble too much, or maybe I rambled exactly enough. But if you did enjoy this, I guess leave a like or a comment. I'm not sure this will be posted, but definitely check out the Untitled Side Channel's Patreon to vote on perhaps the next one of these I'm going to do. Maybe I'll involve some other members of the channel in the future, but this is genuinely something I adore doing. I can talk all the way through a film about all the little tidbits I've learned about it, much to the chagrin of all of my friends and my girlfriend. So thank you everyone at home listening to this who's indulged me in it. I hope to see you all again next time.